Will you guys join me on a bit of a journey? I don't normally go over stuff like this. There was a recent Politico article that I saw. It had a rather catching title when it was presented on Twitter, so I looked at the article itself and I thought, there's something politically valuable here. I mean, I'd hope so. It's Politico, you know, kind of in the name. Our system needs to be broken and he is the man to do it. Ted Johnson, pictured here, sincerely thought he wanted a uniter, not a divider. It didn't last long. This is an article about the American everyman. I wanted us to kind of ground ourselves a little bit. We exist in an environment where people are unironically arguing that the Houthis are like defenders of peace and justice or whatever. I think it's important that we ground ourselves and sort of like get a little more down to earth. Get back down there. Really think about this. What Plumber Joe, where are people at? You know? Get back to our roots. Bedford, New Hampshire. This, Ted Johnson told me, is what I hope. We were here the other day at a bar not far from his house, and we were talking about Donald Trump and the possibility he could be the president again by this time next year. He breaks the system, he said. He exposes the deep state, and it's going to be a miserable 4 years for everybody. For everybody? I said. Everybody. For you? I think his politics are going to be good, he said. But it's going to be hard to watch this happen to our country. He's going to pull it apart. Got tired of that voice real quick? Better leave then. You're going to hear more of it. The notion that somebody might wish for the country's dismantling would have sounded shocking coming from anybody, but it was especially jarring coming from Johnson. Because I was at a Nikki Haley town hall at the VFW in nearby Merrimack in the first week of September when Johnson stood up and asked her a question. Not a video, another article I see. He introduced himself as an independent voter and a retired soldier, and said it felt like the nation was in a civil war, and that some of his neighbors would hate him if he put up so much as a sign for her in his yard. On his mind, too, was his estrangement from his older brother, a rift the former president had done nothing but widen. He wanted to hear Haley's plan to pull us all back together. Worth noting that a significant portion of the GOP electorate are like really sad old people whose children won't talk to them anymore, you know? And like, you know, they don't understand why. Haley at that moment was beginning to become the top non-Trump pick in the Republican primary process, slowly, steadily replacing Governor Ron DeSantis. We see how that turned out. She pitched conservative policies with a more moderate mien, a split-the-difference escape hatch for MAGA movables to not have to outright denounce Trump, but still turn the page. Could she actually finish second in Iowa? Could she win New Hampshire? Could she topple Trump? To do any of that, though, she needed a mix of GOP-leaning independents, Trump-averse Republicans, and at-all open-minded Trump voters. She needed Ted Johnson. And Ted Johnson was listening. So Johnson's journey from that VFW last fall to how he says he's set to vote this week, a 4.5-month turnabout from literally wanting to, quote, pull us back together to literally wanting to, quote, pull it apart, offers as instructive an insight as I've yet encountered into how on earth we are where we are. Trump could be just a disgraced ex-president facing time in prison. Instead, at least for now, he is a durably dominant political force credibly eyeing a return to the White House. And if Trump wins in New Hampshire on Tuesday, he did, and if he beats Joe Biden come November, and polls say he certainly might, it will be because of Johnson and the many thousands of others like him who looked for ways to quit Trump, but ultimately couldn't, didn't, and haven't, and not remotely reluctantly, but with an explicit sense of vengeance. He's a wrecking ball, Johnson told me here at the place he chose called the Copper Door. Everyone's going to say, Trump is divisive, he said, and he's going to split the country in half. He looked at me. We got it, he said. That's what the Ted Johnsons want. The reason I wanted to go over this article is because usually when we talk about what conservatives want, we talk about it in the framework of like they're pundits, advocates, and politicians who are all demons. However, the average Trump voter isn't a demon. The average Trump voter is just a retard. Is that a New Hampshire accent? I haven't been to New Hampshire. I just chose a voice. Deal with it. The average Trump voter is just a retard, you know? Like not some kind of like sinister, conniving, dishonest, whatever. They don't know what they're being pulled in by. I thought this was very grounding. He's 58. He's married to his second wife and has 3 young adult sons. He was in the Army for 22 years. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, and now he is a senior project manager for an IT security company and works from home. He lives in a classic 3-bedroom house he bought almost 4 years ago for $500,000 that's now worth roughly $250,000 more. He's originally from Centralia, Illinois, a town like too many towns in the more rural interior of the country that isn't what it was. He was born in a hospital that no longer delivers babies. His father's gallbladder several years back broke during a snowstorm and he couldn't be airlifted to the closest suitable medical facility in St. Louis. So we just watched him die, he said. Before he voted for Trump twice, he told me, he voted for Barack Obama twice. By September of 2023, though, he was thinking he was ready for someone else, and so he went to the event for Haley. Her answer was long. Too long. You have to be able to take the divisions, Haley said at one point over the course of nearly 10 minutes, and get people to see the best of themselves to go forward. The reaction in the room was mixed, but Johnson liked it. He had given her a few small donations before the town hall, according to FEC records, and he gave a few more after the town hall, adding up last year to $120.90. Not a mint, but a show of support. For Johnson, Trump had shifted from, quote, being the rebel to, quote, being a rebel without a cause, he told me then. But Haley, he called her a leader. He called her more than qualified. He was behind her, he said. I'm looking for someone that can bring us together and move us forward, he said. If we redo everything in the past, the country's going to stay in the past and it's going to stay divided. It was his hope, he said, that she gets more momentum. In retrospect, though, some of what he said during our couple of conversations in the aftermath of that town hall should have been a warning. You do your own reading and your own research, and you're like, what the hell has happened to this country? He told me. He told me about one of his last conversations with his brother, Fred, very much anti-Trump. He goes, well, what do you think about Jan 6? And I say, I thought it was Patriots' Day. And we talked about polling. Trump's going to win, man, he told me. I've been watching the news tonight, and I was like, holy shit, he's 10 points ahead of Biden. So I wasn't totally surprised by the text I got earlier this month, but it was still kind of remarkable. Going with Trump, Johnson told me. He referred to Haley as a, quote, flip-flop rhino. He said she speaks to one side, then to the other, and thinks we're not paying attention. Republicans were just as crappy as Democrats, and Trump, he said, is really the new third party. Our system needs to be broken, Johnson had concluded, and he is the man to do it. So you notice like incredible political incoherence here, just genuine, profound mental retardation. But I think it's also interesting the like cope cycles that he goes with here. He doesn't seem to have any underlying drive. He just seems to want something to believe in. Like there doesn't seem to be any particular set of political principles that he's like trying to maximize. He just seems to follow the vibe, basically. Believing that Donald Trump isn't actually the Republican Party, but like an effective third party, when Donald Trump effortlessly controls the entire GOP and everyone in it is loyal to him, is so insanely delusional. But, he believes it anyway. This is what no sociological imagination does to a motherfucker. This is basically every right-winger I've talked to, though. They all think this is they're all this anti-establishment rabble-rouser. Yeah, no, literally, yeah. And I think it speaks to how we live in an era of populism and how the DNC has failed to capture that energy by leaning towards like moderate centrist institutionalism, even when the population clearly wants someone who is a bit of a rabble-rouser. Joe Biden is the least rabble-rousing guy imaginable. What happened? I asked him now at the copper door. You know what happened? He said. I got pissed. The rift with his brother remains. Ted and Fred Johnson don't talk, but Ted and I talked for more than 3 hours. This is another very common trend that you'll see with Trump voters. They're not happy people. They tend to be doing this as part of like a lashing out against something they perceive as being the source of their problems. That's not to say that there aren't like Democrats who are unhappy. Of course there are. But people don't typically vote for Joe Biden because they're pissed. The more he watched Haley, the less he liked her. She was too scripted, he said. She was weak on the border, he said. She was a corporatist, he said. She was all in on Ukraine, he said, echoing, knowingly or not, some of Trump's attacks. Chris Sununu, the governor here, endorsed her. That was a negative, Johnson said. He's an elitist. He liked the way Haley talked about abortion. She threaded the needle, and she did a very good job on that. So here's a nice little like political incoherence point. What? This guy supports January 6th, thinks that Nikki Haley's weak in the border, that she's a corporatist, but also likes that she was more moderate and restrained when talking about abortion. But he came to not like her tone in her tussles with DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy during debates, a forum many felt she excelled in and credited for fueling her rise. She should have taken some higher ground when she started sparring with Vivek, Johnson told me. Oh, sorry, it's this guy. He probably said, when she started sparring with Vivek, Johnson told me. She came off worse because he doesn't know any better, he said. What does that mean? Look, I hate Nikki Haley too. I think she's a racist bitch. That being said, I think this is what I mean. Remember when I said Nikki Haley could never win the presidency because Republicans are sexist? Listen to this. She should have taken higher ground when sparring with Vivek. She came off worse because he doesn't know any better. What does that mean? Like he behaved poorly during the debate and it reflected poorly on her because she didn't mom him? This is like a very weird, yeah, this is a thing. Like he thinks that Trump is good even though he beleaguers and belittles and insults everyone he talks to, but Nikki Haley should have, I think that's just pure misogyny. It is. Yeah, no, this is like pure unironic, like old-fashioned misogyny. Not the kind you see online from grifters like Andrew Tate, but actual misogyny from people who just are misogynistic. You know what made a big difference? A lot of the ads that he saw mainly on Fox News, he said. Particularly successful on Johnson was an ad from a pro-Trump super PAC that had Haley, quote, saying that illegal aliens were not illegal, he told me. I'm a black and white guy. You break the law, you break the law, he said. If I go out there and break the law, ain't nobody going to help Ted Johnson. I'm going to jail. This guy lives in a 3-bedroom house. He makes 6 figures. He's a veteran. And his politics here are still based in the politics of self-aggrievement. Like, oh man, if I broke the law, who would come back for me? Like who would be there for me, Mind you, of course, it's not breaking the law for a migrant to seek refuge in the United States. That's internationally accepted. Meanwhile, like Donald Trump is currently facing like 50 billion charges in court cases. Again, just notice the incoherence. Isn't this guy literally pro January 6 rioters? Yep. Again, no consistent belief system. This guy's not pro anything or anti anything. He doesn't have any real beliefs. It's just vibes. I've said this so many times. It's not about any specific policy with these people. It's about their stupid, animalistic, dumb primate emotions and what best caters to them. This guy's pissed off because he's probably, let's be real here, he's an unlikable HOG chud with divisive political opinions, who probably doesn't shut the fuck up about them at family reunions. His brother doesn't talk to him. He probably has a weird relationship with at least some of his children. And like most parents who have weird relationships with their children, he is an aggrieved voter who thinks that somehow this is because of progressive politics or wokeness or liberals. And he's angry, and he's just channeling that anger into a vote that doesn't mean anything. No real political principle behind it. There are ways to address that and capture voters like this. For example, I think Bernie Sanders would have done way more to capture this guy than Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders, at the very least, doesn't come across as like a stooge corporatist. There's at least some legitimacy there. It's politics of spite. It's not even politics of spite, really. It's just like Rage Against the Machine, but there's no machine. It's too incoherent to even be politics of spite. Because if it was truly politics of spite, he'd be more directed. I don't even know, really. Rage against nothing. I mean, yeah, Somniostatic is correct. The best way to describe this would be blind reactionary politics. Reactionary politics as driven by underlying emotional processes and not any specific beliefs on any specific issues. It's just like this is just a collection of cognitive and neurological biases collected into a person. Politics of ennui. Yeah. Johnson started talking about Russiagate and Biden's scandals and Hunter Biden. What, I wondered, did Hunter Biden have to do with Nikki Haley? She's not going to hold anyone accountable for what they've done, Johnson told me. People need to be held accountable. That's why you've got to break the system to fix the system. Utterly baffling. Because it's a zero-sum game right now, and to be honest with you, the Democrats are genius. They did anything they could to win and gain power, even if they lie, cheat, steal. What they're doing is destroying this country. Who could bring it back? He answered his own question. Trump's the only one. Wow, the median voters. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. He doesn't have any belief. There's nothing. 90% of people are just as incoherent as this guy. I actually want to be clear. When I say most voters are like this is mostly a Republican thing. Even the stupidest liberals do generally have some kind of principle basis for their beliefs, whether that be something like freedom or democracy or like egalitarianism. I'm not saying they're political wizards or whatever. I'm just saying that, like, I think that in my experiences and based on the like interviews that I've seen and the impressions that I get from exit polling and all that stuff, the questions that they ask at rallies, it really does seem like, have you listened to the kinds of questions you hear at like Democrat versus Republican, anything from town halls to campaign rallies? Go watch some like local government stuff. When local Democrats show up, it's usually like student activist groups or concerned mothers or whatever. But if you go to a Republican meet and then it's time to take questions from the audience, it's a bunch of incoherent like grandparents who look like they'll die on the way out, or people who genuinely don't seem to know why they're there, or people who will bring up like random grievances that don't have anything to do with the issue. I do think that, and the data backs me up on this, I do think that Republicans are like stupider, like cognitively more. IQ testing seems to indicate this. Smarter, more educated people are Democrats. Yeah, and the conspiracy nuts as well. Dermason, it's not a matter of being inconsistent. Basically, everyone is inconsistent to some degree. I'm talking about absolute political incoherence, which is a different thing entirely. Not just whether or not people are good or coherent or whatever else. But, yeah. Unfortunately, being politically incoherent is not the same as being politically ineffective. People being this stupid and dumb, they move like herd animals. They're actually very reliable voters. I think it has to do with cynicism against values and caring, like South Park cynicism. Nope, it's not that. This guy cares very deeply about the things he doesn't know he cares about. This guy is not in any way, shape, or form cynical. Look at how, like, incredibly sincere he is. It's embarrassing how sincere he is. There's no cynicism here. Cynicism is the domain of humans, not dumb animals. No, it's not that at all. It is genuine, just political incoherence. It's another phenomena entirely. You have to remove yourself from the online. We have to, we have to engage with real life shit here. Nikki said, she said it, we're moving on. Forget the past and what she called the chaos. Trump's the chaos creator, but I don't see her holding any of this accountable. I see her getting back in line. Oh, I think he's saying all of this. I see her getting back in line, being a party swamp creature, continuing business as usual, but not holding all this mess that I see accountable. And I think a lot of people think like that. A lot of people do think like that. Not so long ago, though, Ted Johnson wasn't one of them. What happened? I asked him. They started prosecuting Trump for a whole bunch of crap, and I'll be honest, I started feeling for the guy. Okay, again, remarkable political incoherence. Remember how just a second ago he was like, we need to deal with the people at the border because if you break the law, you break the law. And now he's like, oh, they went after him for his crimes? Now I sympathize with him. I says, holy shit, what are they doing to this guy? Can you help me understand more why the legal actions against President Trump have bothered you so much? I asked. January 6th, he said. January 6th was staged. By? The Democratic Party, he said. Nancy Pelosi. Did you always think that? At first I thought it was bad, he said, until time came on and I'm starting to watch. What are you starting to watch? The hearings. The actual hearings, I said, convinced you not that it was very terrible, but that it was a setup, he said. They cherry-picked what they wanted to show. They cherry-picked what Trump actually said. Johnson initially supported Doug Burgum, then considered Haley, but now ultimately supports Trump. Jesus Christ. No, he's saying he used to think, oh, yeah. Yeah, he simultaneously believes the whole thing was staged by Nancy Pelosi, but also that it was Patriot Day. Like, that is his brain is cheese. Hey, median Republican voter. How do we get people like this to care about the right things? You find out what's driving their dumb, idiot, emotional animal impulses, and you try to redirect those. You can't argue with him on the facts. Do you think there's a single fact in this man's head? He voted for Obama twice. How does he have these views? No, Masagui, you're still f***ing up. He doesn't have views. He has a strong, emotionally centered belief, and whatever narrative is given to him that vibes with that belief, that resonates with those emotional impulses, that is the one that he will run with. So leftist populism? Well, populism would be a far more effective way of reaching him than institutionalism. Yeah, for sure. And Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the part of the Constitution that prohibits people who try to overthrow the government from running for office. He didn't do that, Johnson said. There was no insurrection. He said, go over there peacefully and protest. And so for a guy like me, I am looking and I'm saying, why is everyone so hell-bent on getting Trump in jail or getting him not to win? What's your answer to this question? I asked. They're afraid as hell, because this time around, he's going to take the DOJ, he's going to take the bureaucracy of the FBI, the CIA, all the stupid intel agencies that don't do shit, and he's going to upset the apple cart, he said. I refer to the arguments Trump is now making over and over, that he's going to go after them because he says they're going after him, but really they're going after you, his supporters. That's exactly the way I feel, Johnson said. Did you feel like that before he said that? I said. Or did he say that and you said yes? He said that and I said yes, he said. So yeah, perfect. This guy doesn't have independent beliefs. Like, this guy doesn't think. He's like a philosophical zombie or like an NPC or whatever. He has emotions. He runs as, like, politically speaking, his life is on autopilot until somebody gives him something to work with, like a child being given a toy to play with. And trust me, the guy's a pig. He's a womanizer, arrogant asshole, Johnson said of Trump. But I need someone that's going to go in and lead, and I need someone who's going to take care of the average guy. But is taking care of the average guy and breaking the system the same thing? I said. Yes, he said, because they're all in it for themselves. And if you break the system, what does that look like? Accountability, he said. So I asked about the 4 criminal indictments against Trump, the attempts to hold him accountable. The federal election interference case in Washington? I don't see it, he said. There was no insurrection. The porn star hush money case in New York? Totally ridiculous. The sweeping election interference case in Georgia? Jury is out on what's going on there. And the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case in Florida? It's the one that gives Johnson a modicum of pause. You don't f*** around with classified material. Because he's a veteran, see? There's another emotional impulse in here that's pulling him in a different direction. If nothing else, this guy's a vet, lieutenant colonel on retirement. So he does have, if nothing else, a very deeply ground in, like, borderline, like, brainwashed respect for, like, chain of command, stuff like that, you know? Whoever advised him he could have that, he should have given that shit up. But there's the permission. Whoever advised him. Donald Trump has directly said he did this. This wasn't an advisory thing. He said he did. But so, yeah, there you go. That's how he does it, you know? The apologia. But he was being the stubborn, arrogant person that he is. And he added, I didn't like the way the FBI did it. The raid was ridiculous. And that just emboldened me. So this guy wants accountability for people in power, but he's emboldened towards supporting Trump by the FBI going after Trump for something he says is bad. They executed a search warrant. It was their authority to do so. It was a federal case, so the FBI did it. You know, that is their jurisdiction. Like, this guy literally says, like, this was bad, the classified material, and he wants all of this for accountability for people in power. Then the president or former president gets held accountable by law enforcement for something he admits is bad, and this is to him support for Trump, you know? Like, this to him is evidence that he should support Trump even further. I'm glad we're going over this. It's very important to remind chat what the enemy thinks like. What if that went to trial and he was convicted, I asked. Should he still be electable? What's the law say? He asked. Don't do that, I said. That's what the law says. Accountability is accountability, but they're throwing so much stuff at this guy, and it's almost like I'm rooting for him, he told me. This is a whole system of government going after one man who probably, I bet right now, 85 million people want to be president. So again, his response to accountability is like, whatever, like, buff it off. Because he doesn't actually believe in accountability. Again, this is not actually a belief that he has. It's just words he's saying. He probably doesn't even know what the words mean. Dumb animal behavior, you know? He doesn't, like, he's just saying these words. He's heard them from a Fox News presentation about Hunter Biden or something. But accountability is accountability, I said. Accountability is accountability, he said. Whether it's Hunter Biden or Donald Trump, I said. But do I trust the system? He said. I don't. So he's totally okay with law and order when it comes to cracking down on illegal immigration, except, of course, that's not being a criminal. But accountability is no longer accountability when it comes to people like going after his guy. You're a veteran, I told him. You are somebody who doesn't trust the system in the broadest sense you served. I have no trust, he said. The system you served, I said again. That's right, I swore an oath, he said. I believed in that oath. When did you stop believing? I asked Ted Johnson. About when Trump became president, he answered. And that's the end. And there it is. That's why I wanted to go over it word for word, because that in my mind was an excellently written article. That was so well written, goddamn. Yep, you just peer into the void, peer into the abyss, you know? That's what we're dealing with here. All of the arguments and engagements that you're having online with people who represent this ideology or that are ultimately, well, they're not meaningless, but keep in mind that the dumb hogs who turn out in droves to vote GOP are more like this guy than they are the people online with names like Sol Invictus Macaritus Caucasoid with a Roman statue avatar who are arguing about like genomes or whatever. That's just not the nature of how this typically manifests. Much in the same way that like misogyny doesn't typically manifest in this like alpha male Andrew Tate dude bro thing. Not to say that it doesn't matter, but misogyny tends to be a lot more like ingrained and subtle than that. As we saw with this guy, you know, not like the same grifter shit. What do we do about these people? I don't want to just write off another human being. Human being, no. I mean, he is a human. Everything that I've said about political incoherence, I'm talking explicitly about politics. Intelligence is highly segmented, you know? You can have people who are very good at some stuff and very bad at other stuff. I have no reason to believe this guy is like unintelligent in a broad sense. With regards to politics, he's a dumb animal. And that's conditioned behavior. He wasn't born a dumb animal. Well, I guess we're all born dumb animals. He wasn't born with a predisposition to having dumb animal perspectives on politics. Republicans have spent literally decades sort of denigrating higher education, encouraging groupthink, encouraging like irrational, emotive, outrage-based thought processes, try to get people to vote based on their gut, and their gut just so happens to be a collection of random, irrational, emotional biases. This is conditioned behavior. It doesn't happen naturally. As politics go, he and most Republican voters are dumb animals. As holistic human beings, of course, they all have their own lives, you know, who can know, with regards to all of that. In terms of moving people like this over, though, it's the same strategy that I've been talking about for 5 years, okay? You don't argue with them on the facts. You get at the emotional core. Now, this isn't something I would expect this interviewer to do here because you can't get at it in a one-on-one, and that's not the purpose of the interview, right? But you have to get at the core. What is the core of this man's belief? What is the core of this man's political behavior? Is it accountability? Nope. This guy doesn't give a shit about accountability. Is it law and order? Nope. This guy doesn't give a shit about law and order. Is it about the establishment? Nope, it's not. Donald Trump was the president. And this guy has deluded himself into thinking Donald Trump is like a third party when he is the mainline, fully supported candidate for the GOP in 2024, you know? It's maybe there's an aesthetic of being a maverick, but that's not what's really driving him here. It's not that either. So what's driving him? I'll scroll back up to what's driving him. I can tell. Just by looking at this, I can tell. The emotional core of this guy's belief is this right here. This guy served his country for 22 years. He's a vet. Look at all this crap, you know? I'm sure he did some monstrous shit, but he feels strongly about it, and that's what we're talking about right now. We can see he's a Christian. He's got ammunition stored right next to his cross, which is like a deeply sacrilegious thing. The symbol of Jesus Christ laid directly next to a killing instrument. But you know, whatever you're going to go for, you know, Soviet ammunition too. Yeah. Defaced cross as well. Yeah. With like the flags and everything, you know, Catholics are so much better than Protestants about this. This all looks exactly what you would expect it to look like. All right. So anyway, the cross is a killing instrument. You're right. That's true, huh? Anyway, the emotional core of this guy's belief system is this right here. This guy has been politically incoherent for a long time. I guarantee it. And his political incoherence, he's got a beef with the world in a way that veterans often tend to. mistreatment during service, feeling left behind after you leave. He's angry, but his anger isn't at any specific thing. It's just a kind of general feeling that either you've been left behind socially, I think that's a big part of it, or people haven't caught up to you, that other people are acting differently in a way that makes you feel like you were entitled to something you haven't gotten. People often argue that all anger ultimately is down to unmet expectations, and I tend to think that's true. It's because you expect one thing, but you don't get it. You get another, or nothing at all. And in his case, he didn't get what he wanted out of life. Maybe he wanted a bit more acceptance or closer friends or whatever. I don't know. But that grudge inside of him has metastasized to a point where it has become a kind of embittered, an embittered sense of both longing and of self-aggrievement. He wants something better. He's missing something that he needs. He wants something, but he feels that because he's missing it, there's some entitlement he's not getting. There's something he deserves that he doesn't have. And then, through all of his political incoherence, now his support for Donald Trump means that a rift exists between him and his brother. I think this is it. This is the case for a lot of GOP voters as well. I think they feel lost, confused, and upset. I think that in many cases they live in socially isolated communities. This guy was in the military and now he lives probably in a 3-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere. Like maybe he lives in some really spaced out suburban community. What's the town that he lives in? Originally from Centralia. I don't know where he lives currently. Merrimack? Wasn't that just where the rally was held? It's the first word. We were at a bar not far from his house. Okay, there you go. Nobody looks at the first word. A population of 23,000. A really small town. A suburb of Manchester, New Hampshire's largest city. Yep, a wealthy, semi-rural suburb out from a main city. Literally the picture-perfect, like, stereotype of this kind of guy. Socially isolated, doesn't have many friends, estranged from his brother. This guy's got a hole inside of him. He's missing something. And that rage is what he uses to guide his political decision-making. When he talks about accountability, what he's really talking about is this vague feeling that they, and I don't mean they, the Jews, the way so many people, use it. I mean they, like the powers that be, the systems that are too large and complicated for him to understand. And mind you, the average person does not understand how the political systems they live within work. How could they? You kidding me? Like, it's complicated business. The average person does not. Most of the people watching this don't. I don't. It's very complicated. Really depends on where you set the bar. So no fault for that, though I think we should all make a good effort to educate ourselves to at least some extent. He sees all of this as the cause of his existential anxiety, so he directs outrage at it. And because Donald Trump comes across as belligerent, angry, and contrarian, he seems like someone more likely to tear it all down than a person like Joe Biden, who's fundamentally institutionalist, both in policy and in rhetoric. Does that make sense to everyone? There are a lot of Republican voters like this. That ultimately is the core. It's the emotional, it's that feeling. This is why, by the way, conservatives, Republicans, whatever, love it when people go out and buy their houses in like the middle of suburbia with no community or culture there. Those people vote right wing. They do. When people are removed from society, which is what happens when they go out there and they live in suburbia, they're less likely to believe in society. They're less likely to have ties to their fellow man, to care about people. And for that reason, it's much easier to mislead them and, pull them around emotionally. That's why racists will commonly say nothing makes a guy racist like living around black people. But the data says the opposite. The most racist people in the country live out in areas where there are no black people. You see racist shit posters online. They don't live in Atlanta. They live in like Wyoming, They've never seen a black person. They just hear the propaganda about them and take it to heart. They fearmonger. It's like when people say that their number one biggest issue is security at the border and you look it up and they live in like South Dakota. It's like, what? Really? You're worried about the MS-13 sleeper cells making their way into your 100 population town? There's a lot of that. Does everyone understand why I wanted to talk about this? This guy is the face of your enemy. All right? This guy right here. In this dumb animal hog brain. The key to our victory lies. Good thing they're old, I guess. Wouldn't rely on that too much.